Welcome to Page City Council Parks Rec Advisory Board work session. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk, would you please do roll call of the council?
Councilor Bryan.
Here.
Councilor McNutt.
Excused?
Councilor Tappan. Councilor Cormier.
Here.
Councilor Warner.
Here.
Vice Mayor Kojan.
Here.
Mayor Dyak.
Here. There being no quorum of the Recreation Advisory Board, they're not going to be calling themselves to order tonight. They will be participating, seeing as it's a workshop. Here.
Slides into first base.
Okay, we have one item of business this evening's discussion by City Council and Parks and Recreation Advisory Board pertaining to the future operations and management of the Vermilion Cliffs Corrals and Arena. Mike.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. This evening, I think we've got to have a discussion, obviously, on an issue that's going to impact this community, and that's pertaining to the Vermilion Cliffs Corrals and the Arena. We've been very blessed in doing a walk around and spending some time with Mr. Larry Clark. We have been blessed, truly have been blessed to have had an individual that can provide the city a labor of love virtually in the way that he oversaw the operations there in the arena. And Larry, thank you. It takes a lot, I think, to facilitate and to oversee such of a facility. And when I say labor of love, I think Mr. Clark really administered and demonstrated beyond the contract itself that we had with the city. Man, there's just in that walkthrough or drive-through that I had, is just the amount of work and energy that you have to keep up that facility and the cleanup and even the trashing of some of the areas that happens at late nights and the abuse, I think, at times that goes with the operations of such a facility. But to see this individual, just administer the way he has, my hat's off, because it's not like I'm a cowboy, but I can tell you from a facility standpoint that it takes a lot. So with that said, I mean, we have a situation as Larry's leaving and going to one of my hometowns, Casa Grande, Arizona, and we wish him well. We've got an issue here, and where do we start? I mean, you all have been, like I said earlier, blessed to have somebody oversee this, and so that's what I think has promoted this discussion as a group into this community as to what our next direction is going to be. I mean, is this something that the city wants to continue with the operations? I'm not sure. I'm hoping that we'll get it.
I'm going to ask the audience that any side talk in the room be refrained from, because our system's picking that up and we can hear it up here. So, go ahead, Mike.
So with that said, I mean, I wanted to show you a little bit of this land area that we're talking about. We're sort of guesstimating a little bit, but haven't quite really got all of it together. But this is the land area that we're talking about. Hopefully I can pull this up. We'll get it. As you can see, this is we're talking pretty close to the range of almost 30 acres that this individual oversaw. You know, you're looking at this arena right here. Let me see if I can make this work. Here's your arena. That's your rodeo grounds. Obviously, you're surrounded by all the corrals, and it goes beyond this a little bit more. But this is quite an operation, and just wanted to give you a visual of what we're looking at here. You're looking at around right now the rental around 45, right around there, about 45 of your corrals that you have rented out there, and then from what I'm hearing, it's been a drop off a little bit from I think what really has the capacity to be out here that once was in your area. So, you're close to a residential area as well. You have some quite a few acre and a half areas here that sort of support this backside a little bit. We have some issues here though, and we hope we can talk to, but I just wanted to let you see just a little bit of an overage of what we're talking about on the land itself. Any questions so far?
Could I make one comment real quick?
Sure.
Like,
Sure,
there's
yeah.
actually a passageway through from Vermilion Cliffs. Actually comes the other way. It comes from Ranchette Estates into the area that's been set aside so that people over there could ride their horses across and get out into the open area and actually utilize the arena and complex. So you'll see in that drawing, that picture, there's a narrow strip, and that's what that is for, is so Ranchette Estates would have it. And most of the people down that line have gates, not all, but many have gates that actually open into the arena itself. Off of the private land. And we're encouraged to have those.
So our first area of discussion that I wanted just to roll through this, and again, please interrupt me. It's wide open, or if you want me to continue till I'm done. Yes?
What's the zoning of that? No.
We know the zoning of that? I'm sorry, I don't.
Future.
Pardon?
Future development. Future.
Okay. So, general operations, we need a long-term strategy if this is something we want to continue, or so maybe we start that discussion, is this something we want to continue? We have a budget we have to think about, and in taking a look at what Larry's been able to do, you're close to one full FTE out there. You're close. It depends on a little bit of what the roles and responsibilities would be a little bit, but there's at least 30 hours out there for coverage. We've had some insurance, I don't know if so much issues, but it's been an obstacle that we need to talk about a little bit too, a little bit more. Obviously, there's a fee schedule that we have. I'm going to give a pass out. Josh, can you pass out that fee schedule? Or it's, I think, a resolution. There you go. And it's based on the corral size. The rentals can range from anywhere from $55 to $178 is what I'm looking at.
Is that the monthly rate?
Shade.
Is that the monthly rate?
Mhm. Yeah, depending on whether they got shade or the number of horses. And I'm sorry, but I didn't see anything that had to do with water out there. So is that something we want to talk about? This didn't come out really as good as I wanted to, because it looks like it's all over the board, but we have some issues of capital improvement, ongoing maintenance and repairs, something we have to consider, and something that really, I think that it's really developed in the past few years is a stormwater issue. The management stormwater runoff that's happening in the residential areas there where there's a flood that's as a result of the rainoff. And then obviously, what do we want from this arena? Do we want rodeos, fairs, and other events? Is that something that we want to consider as we have this discussion? So I open it up and hopeful that it stimulates some real good dialogue here, because we need this. Staff needs this, and for further discussion, I'll defer back to you, Mayor and Council.
Open the floor for discussion. Ryan?
So I think probably the Parks Recreation Advisory Board's had the most recent public discussion, so to speak, about the rodeo grounds. And it would be from our community meetings that were held to prepare the management plan for the whole park there. So we don't mention the rodeo grounds with much specificity, but it is called for them to continue, and we recognize that there could be some opportunities for additional revenue, for better use, more efficient use, but we didn't put anything prescriptive in the plan because it needed a lot more discussion, so I'm glad this is occurring. Most recently, we've asked the county Parks Department for assistance in terms of a prioritization. We thought, since they run for Tut Hill, if we need to lean on them for samples, protocols, ideas, management strategies, contracts, whatever, that would be a source for some help from the county. So that's the most recent discussions that I'm aware of.
Do you know, just from a cost perspective, it looks like a possible full-time employee down there. What does that bring in? Do we have the numbers? What does that bring in a year, Michael? Do you know?
I'm sorry, Councilmember, I don't know that number right off, but I can tell you as we did a little bit of check finding a little bit in other communities, such as Williams, Prescott, their operations are, and I know they're a little bit more active, but you're looking in the $20,000, $30,000 range for these operations, for these facilities.
Is that revenue?
They are bringing in, I didn't get a cost on the revenue that was brought in, but this is what's going out. So, I mean, again, these are just estimated numbers. It gives you an idea of what the potential is at this arena with the corrals.
We're showing the revenue in our budget for the corral. I had it in here. So $2,500 is all.
That's events alone, the $2,500 is events.
This is revenue. Oh, general fund, okay.
Do you know what the average?
Vermillion Cliffs events, $2,500.
Yes.
Corral utilities, $11,000.
The monthly
year.
billing right now is $5,670 per month, which means it's something over $60,000.
That's for the corral spaces, the leases?
Yes, for the leases.
The revenue that you're getting in.
Buildings, land.
Where's that recorded at, Linda?
It's recorded in the property lease line item. We don't have a property lease. The majority of the property leases are for the corrals. We have other property leases that we collect on that $60,000 that's budgeted there primarily is the corrals.
So I just, as we're going forward with this, I think that's kind of a good place to start, is to find out where our numbers are. And to be pretty clean on that, because how much is coming in and how much we estimate it would cost. Then we can start to, at least from the standpoint of funding, look at where we are. Right? That's the first thing I want to know. And then the second thing, as we opened up this work session, I'm not a horse person, so what's the demand down there? I mean, if you're working in the industry, you think everybody's a horse person, but if you're not a horse person, and you're not in it, you think nobody is. I kind of need to be enlightened. What is our population? How much demand is for it? Is it increasing? Is it decreasing? Those are questions that I have regarding the corrals. And I don't know if anybody can give me
In terms of
pulse on that.
is there pent-up demand? Well, how many vacant corrals do we have? I'll give you an idea.
We have 45 corrals rented now. At its maximum, it was probably like 60 different corrals, 60 different renters. When you see this price up here going from $55 to $176, the minimum that you can rent a corral for, just bare space with a fence around it, is $55. That $176 is wrong because I pay $419 a month. And I own most of the buildings that are on there, which means I built them. If you don't build them, you come in after somebody's left, the city inherits those buildings. They rent for $35, $30 for a shed, and $25 for a shade, regardless of what size it is. these were all built not by the city, but by the people here in the originally. So when I leave, mine will just go to the city.
Larry, when you say that there's 45 corrals rented, do we have vacant corrals there at this time?
We have a few, very few.
Okay, and we
it
also
seems
run
like
a...
Every time somebody leaves, a couple of weeks later, somebody else comes in. It stays pretty constant.
Okay, and do we maintain a few of those corrals as a motel?
Yes, we do.
And that's why they may not be rented?
Uh,
If they were offered up full-time, would they be rented?
There's only one that is actually reserved entirely as a motel unit. What we do, instead of using the other empty ones as motel units, except during rodeos or events that have horses there, we use the holding facilities behind the arena so that those stray horses are not out amongst other people's horses that are local. We've never had a problem with a disease, but there's always that possibility among horses and cattle.
Larry, I'm in the boat with Mike here. I'm not a horse person. So I have to ask, how many events would you say we have out there a year?
How many
Events, like a rodeo or some
It
formal?
varies from year to year. We used to have the carnival that was sent over to the sports complex. That used to be held there. We had circuses come in there. We now no longer have a carnival. The one circus has pretty much abandoned the city of Page, I think, because of the lack of participation in it. It was when it was held actually in the arena, an open circus. We have rodeos. We have 3 to 5 rodeos a year, just depends. This year, we did not have the Western Junior Finals held here. They held them somewhere else. And now I've already gotten word back that they want to come back here for next year's Western Junior Rodeo Finals because our equipment, grounds, everything is maintained much better than they were when they went to. So,
The only comment I would have on that, and this, I don't know, it goes back to Parks and Rec maybe, as a citizen, I don't remember seeing advertisement or local marketing on a rodeo, because I think the family probably would have gone just to go see one, you know? So it's just, I don't know how that gets out, how word gets out on that.
you do not see anything from it. I have dealt with all of the different contractors for, in this position, 6 years and longer than that, even just otherwise. And we have switched from being professional rodeo companies coming in to, they've all pretty much abandoned this kind of an event because they're too small. Some of these organizations, one of them, the Gilberts, has went from doing 25 to 27 rodeos a year to only doing 12 a year because it kind of has fallen off. And so you don't see the professional rodeos that you would see maybe like if you were up in a Wyoming community. What you do see is you see Navajo rodeos. We have had the American Indian Rodeo Association here 2 or 3 times, along with their queen and the whole nine yards. It just depends on what's happening. They get points for their national finals. But the rest of them, instead of being rodeo companies that come in and they bring their whole rodeo in, these that are held by the Navajo usually come in as somebody organizing it. And one guy brings the bulls, one guy brings the steers, one guy brings the roping calves, that type of thing. And they're much harder to coordinate, but they do all the coordination. But myself and Lexi tried to get, and even before Lexi was here, tried to get them to give us feedback, get it done out to the motels. We never got any feedback. I've been trying, every person who's ever held an event there, get us a banner, put it up on a fence. And I've never gotten one.
Is there a fee charged for entrance to a rodeo?
Yes, they charge a fee, and there was supposed to be $1 per person that was collected. It has never been collected and turned into backup, helping to pay for grounds maintenance and stuff.
All right, thanks.
In your opinion, I can remember back when the city used to support and help support the Big Dam Rodeo, and it used to be a pretty good event here. It did have outside sponsors that helped support that event. Is there a market for that type of thing as a community rodeo or something like that?
I don't know that there is. My home community has that type of thing, but I don't know of any of it that happens on the Navajo. And that was one of the comments that I got from the contractor out of St. George is that they weren't treated very well in Page, and not making reference necessarily to the city, but when they would hold one of those rodeos, everybody come by and say, oh, can you donate 20, something to this, something to that from the rodeo company? And they didn't like that at all. They're a business trying to make a living at that, and that was one of the things that was a deal breaker, I guess, with the rodeo company out of St. George, that they finally abandoned this area.
Are there other options that we should be looking at as a council that we aren't taking advantage of in there? Jacarandas and things like that?
There used to be other events held out there. It takes somebody who is involved and drives to go get those things. And the drive that we used to have was Dan Brown. And everything after Dan Brown kind of turned away. It's a lot of work. But Dan Brown and the radio station promoted those things. They were the ones that went out and got them. Done the advertising and all that stuff for him. I worked for Dan as a volunteer on almost all of his rodeos, and we had a lot of volunteer help behind the scenes and stuff. It didn't cost the rodeo contractor anything. Times have changed for rodeo. It's pretty much disappeared, I think, off of the Navajo reservation, except for Navajo rodeos. And they are very good rodeos, but they are ran in a different manner than what they are normally.
Anyone else on council?
I'll just share with you, Steve, at our last Park and Rec meeting, he's on the county Parks and Rec board, and they are fighting this issue with regard to Fort Tuthill, and you might share some of the issues that you're dealing with on a county level.
I think that most of us here are aware that Fort Tuthill and Flagstaff sponsor horse racing down at Fort Tuthill. And even today, there's a huge horse race track down there that's unused. There are all kinds of stables and pens and things like that that are maintained by the Parks and Recs director. But I think largely they remain unused now. So there's some people that talk about trying to reinvigorate that whole thing, but Jim Parks primarily, supervisor Parks. But I don't know where that will go yet. But yeah, Dugan's right. I mean, that it does seem to be something that's dying off.
So what's the percentage of out of the 45 rentals? Can you put a stab at the demographics of those renters? Are they local residents that have horses that don't have a place to put them? Are they? I mean,
the demographics on it would be, to start off with, there are, out of the 45, there are 4 that are non-Navajo. Everybody else is Navajo. And if you are Navajo but not from this chapter house, you have no land rights. So people who come in here, like working at the plant or any other job and want to bring their horses with them, they have to either take them to La Chi and pay somebody at La Chi to keep their horses, or they keep them here. We do even have people from La Chi who have their horses out there. They're actually La Chi chapter people, so they would have some land rights, but the ones that don't, knowing this was coming up, I went over and quizzed one of the guys that I know pretty well, and his comment was, if this goes away, he has no place to take his horses. Now, there is another demographic to this too, and that is some of the local people who are from the La Chi have stock out here in different places, but the roads are bad. It's 60, 70 miles away. So what they do is they keep their horses here, and they only take their horses out there when they're gathering cattle. And so they'll work their cattle and whatnot, then they'll bring their cattle through and take them to market. But they keep their horses here in town, and they live here in town. Some people who pass through, who've had just temporary jobs out here at the plant, they'll come through, bring a horse for a year or two, however long they work. There's a wide spectrum of different types of people that are utilizing the corrals. But the main thing on it is, if the corrals goes away, and this is one of the reasons why I've worked on it so hard, you give me a lot of credit, but I need a place for my horses to stand, and I have 6 of them. And it's like I say, I pay $419 a month for the place for mine to stand. And without that, I would not know what to do. And those horses, like to me, and I would guarantee you, literally every Navajo, that's not a horse. That's your friend. He's part of your family. When you think of a family dog, these horses that belong to these people are even more than a dog. They're an active part of their culture and their life.
A question for Linda. We could establish that we have approximately $60,000 in revenues. What are the expenses like? If we continue operations similar to what we're doing right now, do we have a figure on what it's costing us for those corrals, less the expenses, or, you know?
Well, we ran a report right before this meeting from July 1st to yesterday, October 9th. We have received a total of $19,506 in revenue for the corrals. That encompasses not just the land lease, it encompasses the portion of their utilities, which is at about $2,500 so far. The penalties that you see on your month-end report also pertain, so if they're late, there are penalties that are assessed, about $1,900 worth there. And then, of course, sales tax revenue, about $1,000. That makes up that $19,000 for the roughly
July 1 through,
current
3 months.
3 months, basically.
okay. And do we have an expense number for that same period?
The expense, let me see. The utilities would be the primary expense number. So I don't have that here broken out specifics. Our utilities coming in, they're buried all, this is all in the general fund, reported by line item by revenue, but expense, I'd have to run a more detailed report.
If you were to make an experienced, I don't want to, I guess I'm calling it a guess.
We're getting into estimates when we start talking
Yeah.
numbers. I
Yeah.
hate to start
But-
making guesses and
well,
make
but the thing
decisions
is-
on guesses.
Or if we're bringing in 60, is it costing us 80? That's what I'm trying to, that's what I'm trying to get at. But
What, Mayor, you're getting at is or at least in my mind, I'm just opening up my thoughts, you know, it comes down to, if we have to subsidize it, are we in the business of subsidizing a corral? Do we consider it a park and a recreation? Is it something that subsidizes? Does it pay for itself? Okay, if it pays for itself and we can pay for general operations and a long-term strategy, and it can also cover, you know, the costs of mitigating rain, flooding. Okay, I'm for it. If it brings up and it covers its cost, then if it doesn't, then that becomes a council
then you have to
decision.
figure out
Right.
how much of an amenity is it?
Right, and that's where I think we as a council have to come down and say, well, is this, do we consider this a Galliard Park, or is that just a servicing a few? Those are the decisions that we would have to make, and if it's a booming thing, and maybe there's potential for economy to bring in the revenue. If it's a waning thing, then we're putting our good money after bad. And that's what I think we have to get to, and so I wish, we just need to probably get those numbers a little more solid before we can start going. It's not all numbers driven, but, we all know here, we all sit here, we all know that that's the big elephant in the room, is what is the cost?
Well,
Make one comment on that.
can-
Back when Rick Olson was the city manager, Rick Olson said it had to pay for itself. There was a utility raise for $10 per head per horse for getting rid of manure. There was a raise in rent on everything. And I would assume at that particular time, which was 2 years ago, that it was raised up enough to pay for itself at that particular time, because he said it had to pay for itself.
Councilor Tappan?
I think that we can make this a self-sustaining amenity for Page and another attraction here. I know just today I heard a story about 2 kids that were signing up for high school, and they were going to sign up for the high school rodeo club, but unfortunately we don't have that right now. So I think if we got the right person in there, it could be a self-sustaining amenity.
Yeah, I would agree with Mike that, about the numbers need to match, but I think also we might want to not just analyze right now, but analyze what the possibilities could be in the future. Is there pent-up demand? Are there more events? I know that people have some concerns sometimes with the appearances from the outside. What are the necessary improvements that need to be made, and how can we fund those? But I would agree with Levi. I think that there's some good opportunities for making it self-sustaining.
I just think we need more information as far as the sustainability of it. And if we are, whatever direction we go, Larry has put a ton of free volunteer labor into that facility, but he has had no support in terms of monetary improvements in the surface of the roads. It's just the displacement of sand. And if you've been at some of the windy rodeo times, you can't see hardly across the street. So if, whatever direction we go in, if we're going to be in that particular recreational component, then it needs to be of a standard and a level that we feel is equal to a ballpark or a skate park or anything else. And I agree, it needs to be self-sustainable, and I think we need more information. Can it be self-sustainable at a standard that we require it to be if we manage it through the rec program?
It seems to me that, also we're talking about a 30-acre piece of property here, so it's not an all-or-nothing proposition. I would think that if rodeo is dying out, then you can eliminate the stadium down there, or the rodeo grounds itself, but still maintain some kind of horse motel or horse stables, etc. You can eliminate some of the things that aren't providing money and hold on to the things that are, as well as doing a good thing for the citizenry.
I was going to point that out too, so glad you did, because 30 acres, you have to evaluate in that financial equation, what's the land value? 30 acres is a lot of land, and we're talking about selling 20 acres to an RV resort. And 30 acres is a valuable chunk of real estate. And if it may be that one of the solutions is a size down. Maybe it's an improvement, a new facility with improved corrals, road surfacing, only in a minimal scale that can sustain itself over time. And that may be 5 acres. Certainly 30 acres is a lot of land on Hall Road.
Well, and the Canyon Club pitched in and did some remarkable things for the 4-H. And 4-H, I believe, is still something that is around, and there are people involved in it, and there may be more of an enticement utilizing some of that property to expand the 4-H down there.
I've been here too long because the corral was not supposed to go there. It was done there as a stopgap thing when they built the school down there on corrals, and it was supposed to be moved elsewhere, and they just never did move that. That's prime housing property right there, and there was some people come in here wanted to do a housing thing there, and we ran them off.
Well, in the history of the corrals, I mentioned this to the Parks Board the other day. It's been a moving. It started out as just some people who had horses, and they basically just
And they used to be on the north end of town.
They put up some makeshift corrals, and at that time the Bureau pretty much managed the city, and you're fine, you're in the middle of the desert, so go ahead. So it became sort of a shanty town, and made of leftover plywood and pallets, and as this community grew in that direction, it's like we got to get rid of this eyesore. And I don't know exactly if it was a process that was well thought out, or it was like well, there's some land, move it over there. And oh, by the way, maybe we can get somebody that is interested to kind of take us. So I don't believe it's ever been well thought through that this is a recreational amenity for the community? Or is it is it more of a satisfying a need to a special use group? So I think we have to get the information to evaluate that and determine whether it is a rec component, because if it's a rec component, then it needs to go in the recreation department and it needs to be managed as such. If not, then we need to utilize the land for a better use.
I think
Well,
we-
and that's the whole reason I asked the zoning in the first place. That's the first thought came to my mind, is it in the right spot? Is there a better spot for it? Is there a spot that backs up the trails and whatnot?
Well, the Ranchettes property was built with horses, and it was partly, I think, put there next to the Ranchettes property, because that's the property that owners had horses. So it made sense to put the corrals right next to that property.
But there's one more question for Larry, though, is if the NGS plant closes, what kind of effect will that have on how many rentals we have, you think?
I'm not sure that it's going to affect it at all, because we've already had some people who have been transferred out, probably 5 or 6, but those 5 or 6 have already been replaced by other people who don't work for the plant. So I'm not sure exactly where it will go. It's not going to vanish because of the plant leaving.
But you said that
Those places are rented by people who have horses otherwise and who have jobs otherwise.
But you mentioned one thing that is a little bit concerning, and that is the fact that you believe that the vast majority of the renters are basically using this facility because they live on the reservation and don't have a place to put their horses. I would want to know, if we're using tax dollars, is this something that the local citizenry is benefiting from, or are we an apartment for horses that live somewhere else? And because
The people live here. That's the key thing.
In Page.
They live here. They don't keep their horses here and live someplace else other than a few people at La Chi, which is still part of our community.
Okay.
This, to me, goes back to just being a gateway community. I've lived in 3 of them in the national parks. Some very successful. One is still a government camp, and this one, which has been turned into a city. But there's nothing that way but Indian reservation, and if you are Navajo and not of this chapter, this isn't a limitation to you also. And and then there's National Park Service, there's Bureau of Land Management. You don't have a place to go if you want horses. That was one of the reasons that I did actually come here, was because they had the corrals. I moved here 33 years ago. The corrals were in great shape. They were popular. There was lots of rodeo events and stuff going on, and that was one of the things that we moved here, was because, working with the federal government, I could have a place to keep my horse. Otherwise, I would have taken the offer for my promotion to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Georgia instead of here.
I think that we've established one thing here tonight, and this is on an agenda for direction during our regular council meeting. I think one of the things we've established is we don't have enough information to even make that decision, possibly, but we certainly, at the regular agenda item, can direct staff to do some of the things that we might be interested in. And I'm seeing at least a trend that we don't have enough information and stuff. And as we move forward with that direction, I will put out there that I have knowledge that at least 2 people have expressed if the city is interested in continuing the operation of the corrals, that they would be interested in doing an RFP with the city of that nature. One that Mike already had, and then there was another one that came about late this afternoon that I'll share with Mike, depending on where we go down the road. But I think we at least need to get that information as to see if revenue and expenses, what that might be like, and stuff like that.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Linda, how long would it take you to run back and dig for expenses? Is that something you could have an early council meeting in a half hour?
Meaning?
I'm just,
Well, it might be appropriate if we generate a list of questions that we want to gather so we can evaluate this better. One of the things would be, what's your expense, and we know kind of where your revenue is, but what are the expenses and what's the insurance requirements, and what's the demographics behind the renters, and specifically, who are they, where they come from, and is there a viable need for us to look to develop an equestrian estate area, whether it be there or somewhere else, and we can gather a list of questions that would help us answer that and deal with it, because
Is there a possibility of teaming up with the state park system or another entity?
we know the state park system doesn't have a lot of money.
that's a given.
I'm sure they'll come in if we put front end in there.
They'll do anything if we got the money.
Bill?
Yes, sir.
So I don't know what the urgency is also, that kind of factors in, how quickly do you need to make a decision, and how much luxury time do you have to do some forward thinking. But I would urge the council, if you get to decision-making, that if you get some information, but need to get somebody in there to manage because Larry's gone, that you make it a short-term thing if there's still some more things to be considered. For instance, from what I'm hearing, if the arena is not a primary asset that's going to generate more events and stuff, then maybe downsizing. Maybe if this rental thing is a moneymaker, sell somebody some property to run some corrals and get out of the business altogether. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can do this. So if you needed somebody to run it because that's a need, I would urge short-term if we haven't figured out a long-term vision.
We could possibly push this back to the Parks Board for them to make an evaluation recommendation and do some homework and research as well.
We could certainly do
The
that.
biggest thing that's further down that little stroll that we haven't addressed is the complaints we're getting from runoff. And of course, because the city never follows their own rules, there's never been a drainage plan done for that area.
Yeah,
It's going to be
and that
very
was-
costly.
That was one of the things. Well, do you know what? The thing about that, the horses aren't necessarily causing the drainage plan. It's the fact that we don't have a drainage plan there, period. That's the problem. It's not the horses. So anyway, we've had a lot of discussion around here as we're kind of, I think we're kind of getting to a point where we know, and we're given some direction to, we can certainly give direction to the board in later on. We don't have a lot of horse people in the room, but I see a couple, and I'd like to hear from them.
Well, I think it'd be very sad to have a community where you don't offer some places for horses. It would be really sad. And once you get rid of the arena and stuff, you've lost the opportunity to bring in some events. Not necessarily just horses, but other kind of events using that big arena. It seems like it'd be awful. And it borders my property. Those are the biggest lots we made for Page, and it worries me. At one time I had to fight that. They thought they could sell that, they could put in business all along there. Well, I don't want businesses backing up to my 3-acre lot with livestock. Because then they start complaining about problems. So I just think it'd be awful, because people do come through here, and I come in and leave and say, where do we put horses? That's me. And when you say, what demographics? Well, I don't have kids, but I support the parks. There's other things that go on in this community that I might not care about, but I still support and think it's a good idea. I don't have anything to do with skate park, but that's a demographics. Even though you're not involved with it, you want to encourage it and have things for families and people to do.
So if there's not a lot of other questions or anything, I don't think we have any answers, but I think we've got some further questions that we need to get research and stuff on. If you don't have another question you want to bring up at this time, then we'll just give some direction at the agenda item on the regular agenda.
Michael, do you have any, I mean, this is a work session, it's not a council meeting, so this is, we freely exchange our ideas. Would you have any more things that you want from us? Or sometimes I feel like you walk away, and it's not just you, but other city managers walk away with a more clouded picture than they came in. And I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to ask, if you're walking away, because we put a lot on the city manager, we're asking to, formulate this. Are there specific questions that you want answered from council? Do you want to know what we think or on specific items, or I just want to make sure you're comfortable with this?
Thank you, Mayor and Council, thank you. No, actually, this actually opened my eyes up a little bit more, because I didn't have the questions. As I alluded to earlier, it's an area, it's actually an arena where it's sort of new to me a little bit. So when it's like that, I get quiet and I just listen. But some of the questions that have been raised here are good questions, valid questions, and makes me wonder that I didn't do my homework all good tonight, if that's what I'm taking away, and I feel that. There's been some very good comments, and I really appreciated the comment from our resident on her perception of how they support other parks, other amenities, and they don't have kids to support that here anymore. So that's like the big picture for me. But in respects to the rodeo and to the stables, that is opportunity here. That's what I see. You have a facility here. And I think that if it's, we explore it with more homework, what the possibilities are to add to the assets, because there are some usage out of what you have out there. That arena, it is like a park, if you really think about it. If there's barrels racing, there's some things, there's people that are practicing out there in the evenings or early mornings, so that's their version of a park. So I see that, but this has been good for me as far as the work I need to do and to be better prepared for another discussion.
I agree. I think it could be a huge asset. You just have to have the right person in there that's their thing, and they'll push it and bring events. And there's something that happened in Gila Bend. The Junior Rodeo Association is growing, and they come in numbers. We hosted last year their first junior rodeo, and we had over 2,000 people in Gila Bend for 3 days. And we got lucky. It was just that there was a rodeo circuit that didn't make, and so they brought it to Gila Bend. And so I got to see what that audience looked like, that, when they came in and, just brought a lot of energy into your community. There is a niche. We just have to find that niche, I think. I think your pro rodeo circuits are sort of fading a little bit. I think they're not as strong as they used to be. I just really see the growth in the junior rodeo associations, and that's something maybe we can look at. Florence has one of the oldest rodeos, and it's a junior Parada rodeo is what they run. And so maybe that's something we look at. There's many uses on the arena itself. There are some arenas that are rodeos on the reservation that they host their native dance on. There's just many things I think we need to explore a little bit better, and hopefully I can come better prepared the next time for you all. My apologies.
Is there a typical season for rodeo, like time of year?
Their springs are very heavy, depending on the demographic, depending on like Yuma, it's a big attraction. Tucson is another big attraction. But Arizona, in middle Arizona, Maricopa County, I don't see it heavy there as it used to be, outside of your rural communities like Florence, Wickenburg. But I think there's a lot of potential here in Page for that to happen. We just have to explore a little bit better.
It takes a stimulus of the individual who's passionate about that, like Larry has been, to get those entities to come. And unfortunately, as Steve mentioned in Flagstaff, at one point they had that, and they don't, so now they have empty. No, is there a demand, and can we meet that demand? And if not, then perhaps is there a solution to allow for people that own horses to have stables and a nice clean environment? Maybe we partner with the 4-H or some way to do that. But without that driving force, and if that driving force doesn't come forward while we're at this stage, then I don't see how you can just wish it to be happening. It won't wishing won't make it happen. It takes the driving force. So bring them to the table. Bring somebody to the table that's got the desire to engage in that, and man, that changes it.
I think you can also, I think you can also, if you end up doing an RFP or something else, you can also structure that to do a couple of things. One, if there's improvements again, put that in up front. Whoever gets into this arrangement, here's what we expect in terms of improvements over a certain number of years. And you can also then somehow incentivize that to really say, we want 3 rodeos a year or whatever, and just make it so that it works for that, whoever gets that contract to keep a substantial amount of funds to make it worthwhile. So I think various ways you can incentivize something for a future agreement if you have a vision of where you want to go.
So do you have a temporary solution to who's going to run that facility, since we don't have any answers and Larry's leaving?
We are working on that. I'm hopeful that we'll have something here in the next week or two.
Councilor Talbot.
I say,
Pushing us down the road.
to be successful, you're also going to have council support, because we haven't spent $1 on that arena. It probably would have fell apart a long time ago if it wasn't for Larry.
Okay, I think we're going to have some further discussion and probably some action at our regular council meeting. So it is about 6:23, and we're going to adjourn this meeting, and we'll be starting our regular council meeting at 6:30. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Can I ask a real quick
Let's know if we get
question?
assigned something.
Has the city or somebody put out on the radio and in the newspaper saying they're looking for someone to manage the crowds?
We haven't.
Yeah, see, I didn't know any of this was going on. I mean, it hasn't been out there, so how can people come forward and say, because they're passionate and want to help manage the crowds? I think with Larry and they got it, there were several different people who were vying for that position, correct?
Yeah.
So they're still,
We
and
had
some
to
of
bid
those
for
are
it.
still here, I understand. So you're saying you want to know if there's someone out there to manage it, when I'm not sure there is. But you need to put it out there so they can come forward.
Okay.
That's true.
We need to know where we're
All right.
going first.
We're adjourned. We will be starting our regular council